We never realized our mistake until the war was over. General Abraxas's deep, sonorous buzz cut through the chatter in the room, all side conversations ending abruptly as he started his speech. Gathered before him were the political leaders of the Corvan people, all demanding an explanation as to what had gone so disastrously wrong. The loss of the war with the Terrans was still a point of major confusion with most of the citizens of the Empire. The campaign had been proceeding as expected, when suddenly the tides turned. In less than 2 months, the Corvan Empire went from being on even footing with the Terrans to desperately trying to survive. I'm sure many of you are wondering how such a thing has happened. A surrender, much less a total surrender, has never occurred once in our great history. I know that such a thing seems unthinkable, but I assure you, we had no other choice. The change occurred suddenly. The tactics of the Terrans became brutal. Instead of typical ship-to-ship combat, the Terrans began to attack our ships physically. Gesturing to the screen, one of the new Terran ships appeared. It was an ugly, ungainly-looking thing, lacking the clean curves and pleasing design of the Corvan cruisers. The ship looked like a floating lump of raw steel, heavy plating prominent. They no longer even tried to shoot at us or perform tactical maneuvers. They simply found one of our ships, set course, and rammed directly into it. Once engaged, the fighters within poured into our ships and, well, perhaps it is better to show you. The screen behind the general changed, showing the security feed from within a Corvan battleship. The feed started out as nothing but static and distorted shapes, but soon came into focus. Apparently, the Terran ship had just crashed into theirs when the playback began. The rough-looking front of the intruding ship opened quickly, and a swarm of Terran fighters poured in. There was little in the way of strategy or coordination in their attack. Instead, the human fighters came screaming towards their foes in an unmistakable rage, chanting something in their brutish language. They were armed with melee weapons only, seemingly not content to fight at range. The Corvan rifles fired into them quickly, but to little effect. The Terrans seemed to have armed themselves, similarly to their ships. As a result, they were not fast or elegant. They were, however, shockingly deadly. Using axes, hammers, swords, and at times simply their fists, the Terran invaders rushed upon the Corvan soldiers, sweeping over them like a tide. The brutality of their assault was terrifying to behold. Corvan soldiers were not simply killed, no. They were dismembered, pulverized, ripped apart bodily. The hate displayed by the Terran warriors was nearly tangible, their screams of rage overwhelming the cries of pain of their victims. The scene shifted to various cameras, showing the horde of Terrans flow through the ship. They scoured every inch, leaving no one alive. They asked for no surrender, made no demands. They simply killed every Corvan they found with extreme prejudice. During the entire assault, the strange chant never seemed to stop. The silence in the room after the security feed ended hung heavily over the crowd. Any lingering traces of anger or disbelief were gone. The politicians, already not used to the terrors of war, were stunned, almost senseless, by the extreme violence before them. This was typical of every assault led by the Terrans. They never once tried to communicate in any way. As soon as they saw one of our ships, they attacked. They seemed unstoppable. Their armor, though impressive, was not inviolable, but even the shots that hit seemed to have little effect. If an attack was not immediately fatal, they fought on. In deference to the propriety of this gathering, I have shown you one of the less brutal assaults, but there are examples of the Terrans missing limbs or even with holes through their torsos, still fighting, still killing. And I'm sure many of you are wondering what they were chanting. We wondered that as well, hoping that translating it would give us some insight into what had changed, but after translating the words, we were none the wiser. The chant translates to simply 516. The screen changed again, showing a series of what happened to be barren asteroids, but upon closer inspection, some metallic ruins could be seen among the rocky terrain. These are what are left of our advanced bases and manufacturing facilities. Again, the humans' destruction seems to know no bounds. They destroyed our outposts, our factories, and our hangars. Normally this would be understandable. We were in a war, after all, and destroying the enemy's production capabilities is a standard tactic. But the Terrans went above and beyond the norm. After destroying the facilities, they launched bombardments of all sorts, coating the players in radiation. Even worse, they left behind viruses that are fatal to our kind. To even make these planets habitable again would be the work of centuries. Using them as military installations would take years more. They thus destroyed not only our soldiers, but our ability to make war. General Abraxas pauses for a moment, looking down. He is obviously shaken. Those who knew him find the display even more appalling than the recorded assault from earlier. To see the proud general appear so broken was hard to be believed. Worst of all, they showed us that none of us was safe. None of us. In war, those who led the battle are often out of the way of direct danger. As such, we had thought ourselves to be invulnerable. We learned that we were not. The general points at a new image on the screen, now showing an odd, black, coffin-shaped device. What you see is the most diabolical of the Terran's weapons. Near the end of the war, 12 of these devices landed across our homeworld. They were simply too small and too shielded to be seen by our sensors, and anything that small could do true damage to our planet, such as nuclear or antimatter warheads, would have been detected. These, however, carried a much more dangerous payload. More security footage plays, showing one of the strange devices come screaming through the atmosphere. It slowed itself enough not to destroy itself on landing, coming to a skidding halt in front of a large government building. The lid popped off the device, launching several feet into the air. A humanoid shape scrambled quickly from inside it and began running towards the doors of the building. It was hard to see through the debris still hanging in the air from the coffin's arrival, but it looked like a more advanced version of the protective suits worn by the human warriors in the previous recording. The human was simply unstoppable. It ran through the doors of the building as if they weren't there, not breaking stride as it headed towards its goal. The few guards who were able to react had no effect on slowing it. The shots from their guns simply bounced or were absorbed. Those who tried to physically stop this thing were thrown aside as easy as the doors had been. The feed continued, showing the Terran heading towards one specific office. It ran through the door, not wasting the time to open it. The feed abruptly paused at this point. You likely cannot read the plaque beside the door, but this was the office of Admiral Jurex. Again, for the sake of common decency, I have stopped the footage at this point. However, the human, it did not stop. By the time security forces caught up, the Admiral was long since dead. The Terran, however, was still attacking the corpse. The Admiral's head was gone, crushed into nothingness by the Terran's gauntlets. It never stopped punching the area where Jurex's head had been, screaming a sentence over and over. It ignored any of our forces as they tried desperately to pull it off the Admiral. In the end, security simply hammered the creature to death with the butts of their rifles. Throughout the 20 minutes it took to kill it, it never stopped savaging the corpse, nor did it cease screaming that one phrase. Again, we translated the phrase, but it helped us little. The mad human simply repeated, "Her name was Sarah." At this point, the end of the war was a foregone conclusion. They could kill our soldiers at will, and in such terrifying fashion that our remaining soldiers lost all morale. They could remove our ability to make war, and take those facilities from us entirely, and they had shown us that none of us, no matter how highly placed, was safe. They had the skill and the technology to fight us, yes, but that did not seal their victory. It was their will. They had turned the entirety of their very beings to our destruction. Thus, when they asked for our surrender, it was never truly a choice. Our only other option was complete and utter annihilation. It was at this point that we finally found out what had changed the entire war. When the terrorists demanded surrender, they cited our destruction of a small outpost as the reason for their rage. We thought little of it at the time. It was a location holding their young. We had simply assumed that their young were much like ours, numerous, quickly produced, and basically nameless until they reached maturity. The humans apparently think differently. In destroying the small settlement of 516 humans, the young and their caretakers, we had awoken a beast more terrifying than anything in our nightmares. This was the end of the human transmission. It should explain rather clearly why we surrendered. He turns to look up at the screen with the rest of the audience. One of the Terrans appears on screen. Even though its features were utterly alien to the Corvins gathered there, the unfettered rage and contempt were clear. It demanded their surrender, that they cease all military production for the indeterminate future, and allow themselves to be invaded by the humans. Its last line caused even the stoutest of the bugs to tremble, as it spoke through clenched teeth. "If you ever touch our children again, we will return. And next time, we will not be so merciful."